ahead and have a seat. Have a seat. Hey, my name is Brian Smith. I am one of the pastors here at Doxology. So glad you're here with us this morning. So, hey, I got a couple announcements before we get started. One, who likes to eat? Just show of hands. Okay, we got a few here. So, hey, tonight, actually at my house, and so I think we've got a slide. We can put my address up here. We're having just kind of a potluck dinner for everyone at the church. And so tonight at 5 o'clock, 208 Henley Drive, 5 o'clock, we'll be there kind of all night. So if you can't show up right then, show up whenever you can. But just kind of an opportunity to get to know some other people in the church. We'll have some barbecue. We'll have whatever you bring. Okay, so if you can bring some sides and things like that. But we're going to have a really good time, but we'd love to have you. If you have any questions, that's my phone number there, but 208 Henley Drive, we're going to hang out and we're going to sweat to death together, okay? And so we're going to do that this week. So, hey, one other thing I kind of wanted to point out, you should have had on your chair when you come in a little piece of paper. I don't know what these are actually called, pamphlet or no, brochure or just a piece of paper. You should have this in your chair. This is for something we're doing next Sunday. It's called intentional parenting. And so, a lot of times we just, as parents, I've got two, a teenager and one about to be a teenager, and it's always just kind of like surviving to the next thing, okay? But like, how do we kind of parent our kids in a direction on purpose? And so that's kind of one of the things we're going to talk about next week. So it's 5 o'clock. It'll be from 5 to 6:30 here at the church, at the school, okay? Here at the school. We're going to have dinner for you, okay? And so free food. We're going to have childcare for you as well. We're going to have a movie night and kind of food for your kids that they're going to watch in the gym while this is going on. And so it's going to be awesome. So just kind of all you have to do is register so we know how much food to get. So if you can scan this QR code right now, you can go and register on our website as well. But it's going to be a lot of fun. Just kind of it's kind of some discussion and what are some ways that we can do to kind of shepherd our kids' hearts toward Jesus and some intentional things toward that. So if you have kids of any ages, if you think there's a chance that you might have a kid someday in the future, if you just know a kid, okay, then you want to kind of do something for them as well. So we'd love to have you show up at that intentional parenting next week, 5 o'clock. I'm probably going to text you about it this week if I know you too. And so, hey, kind of on the same lines of parenting, a few months ago, my wife and I, we got an email from my daughter's teacher telling us that she had gotten in trouble at school, okay? She had gotten in trouble in the lunchroom that day, and so she wasn't, like smuggling drugs in her PB&J or anything like that, but she may or may have not, thrown some food at a mouthy little 5th grade boy who was there, and so, which I was kind of proud of her for, but we got the email telling her that she got in trouble at lunch that day, and so we get her, and she doesn't know, okay, I'm going to pick Conley up from school that day, and she doesn't know that I know, okay, that she had gotten in trouble that day. So I go and pick her up, and I just love to mess with my kids, okay? And so I'm just going to see, hey, is she going to tell me? Is she going to come clean? I'm just going to kind of ask some questions. So I pick her up. She gets in my truck. I'm like, hey, Conley, how was school today? She goes, oh, it was great, Dad. Just a great normal day. I was like, that's awesome. I was like, hey, well, did anything, special happen or did anything kind of go on that was a little bit out of the ordinary, that maybe didn't really normally happen for you at school today? And I'm driving off and I'm looking in my rearview mirror and I see her, in the back seat, and I can see it in her eyes. Okay, I see it in her eyes, and she's kind of going back and forth. One, she's like, does he know? Does she know? And I can just see her going back and forth in her mind. Should I tell him or should I try to keep myself out of trouble? Should I tell him or should I save myself? And I recognize that just kind of that back and forth, that she was feeling in that moment because I've been there myself. Okay, I've wrestled with that same question, that same thing before in my own life as well. I know the right thing to do. Okay, I know the right thing to do in this moment, but if I do what I know that I should do, I know that it's going to cost me. If I do what I know I should do, I know it's going to cost me. Okay, there's going to be a price to pay. There's going to be some consequences if I make the right decision in this moment. If I do what I know that I should do, it's going to cost me. Have you ever felt that before? Have you ever wrestled with that before? Have you ever felt that tension before at different points in your life? If I do what I know that I should do, there's going to be a cost. There's gonna be a cost to it. Maybe it's a situation to where, telling the truth at work, okay? Maybe there's some unethical practices going on, and maybe if you tell the truth and you kind of speak out, it could cost you. It might even cost you your job. Maybe it's standing up for something that you believe in, something that you know that is right, but it might cost you, okay? It might cost you a friend. Maybe it's being honest with a family member. And if you do that, maybe it's something about them or something you need to be honest about. And you know that if you do that, it's going to cost you some peace in your home. Maybe it's giving up some kind of, destructive habit or addiction in your life. And it's not just about losing that thing. If you give up that habit, okay, it's also going to cost you a place where you belong. And it's going to cost you what you should do. But if you do what you should do, it's going to cost you. Maybe it's admitting a mistake or coming clean about someone. It's going to cost you some trust with somebody that you love. Have you felt that? Have you felt that tension in your life before? You know what you should do, but if you do what you should do, it's going to cost you. Okay, that pull, that tension that we have in our life that kind of pulls us away from a life of integrity. What do we do in those moments? How do we handle those different moments when we find ourselves in that situation? That's kind of the question we want to talk about this morning. Where do you find the courage? Okay, where do you find the courage to do the right thing when you are certain that the right thing is going to cost you? Where do you find the courage to do the right thing when you are certain that the right thing is going to cost you? If you have your Bibles, open them up to Daniel chapter 6. We're going to kind of answer that question this morning. If you haven't been with us over the past couple weeks, or if you're new with us this morning, we are in the study through the book of Daniel, okay, the Old Testament book of Daniel. This morning, we're going to look at the story in Daniel, okay? It's the most famous story in the book of Daniel. It's probably one of the top 3 most famous stories in the entire Bible, the story of Daniel in the lion's den, okay? And it's a familiar story for us, especially if you've been in church before. And so this morning, we're going to look at this familiar story. And Daniel, he's going to help us answer our question: where do you find the courage to do the right thing when you are certain, okay, that doing the right thing, there's going to be a price to pay. It's going to cost you. Let's find out. Now, it's a really good story, okay? So what I'd like to do is just kind of read it to you, and then we're going to kind of draw out a couple of principles at the end. And so a little context about where we're at right now. So Daniel, at this point, he's probably about 80 years old, okay? When we first saw him in our study, he was a teenager, but at this point, some people say 70 up to 90. He's somewhere around 80 years old, and so he is serving under a new king. Okay, and he was, if you've been with us, he's been serving under this king called Nebuchadnezzar. Well, Nebuchadnezzar is gone. Okay, the Babylonian Empire is now gone. It's been overthrown like Daniel predicted it would happen in Daniel chapter 2. And there's a new kingdom, the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. And there's a new king named King Darius. Okay, King Darius is now sitting on the throne. So let's kind of read this story together. Daniel chapter 6. Beginning in verse 1. It says, it pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. So King Darius has come in, he's in charge now of this new empire, and he's reorganizing a little bit. Okay, he's kind of reorganizing the government, and what he's done, he's set up these 120 satraps, or kind of 120 protectors of the kingdom. They gathered taxes, they made sure the king's edicts were happening the way that they should, 120 throughout the kingdom. And then he set 3 administrators, or 3 kind of governors over those 120. And the best of those 3 is Daniel. Okay, kind of like he's always done. He's kind of risen to the top of the crew there, and he's done such a good job, and the king is so impressed with him. He says, Daniel, I'm going to give you a promotion. And he's basically going to promote Daniel to what in essence was the prime minister of this entire kingdom. And so it sounds like a great day for Daniel. Like this is like, okay, this will be good. This is a promotion. It's something that should be good news for him, but it's actually going to cause him some trouble. Verse 4, it says, at this, the fact that he was going to get promoted, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. So at this point, Daniel, he has been working in government, okay, for 55 plus years. And these guys, man, this guy's been in government for over 50 years. Man, surely we're going to find something. Okay, there's some skeletons in the closet here. There's some dirt that we can dig up. We're going to be able to find something in this guy's life to be able to take him down. Surely there's something. Surely we're going to find something, but they can't. They can't dig up any dirt, so they switch to another tactic. Verse 5, it says, finally these men said, we will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel. He has integrity. He's trustworthy. We'll never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God. They say, hey, if we're going to take him out, okay, if there's something that we're going to be able to do to bring him down, it's going to have something to do with his commitment to God, to his commitment to his God. And so here's what they do. They decide to set a trap for Daniel. So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, may King Darius live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed. Now, I don't think that's true. Okay, I don't know it was all of them. Okay, Daniel probably wasn't there. Okay, he's one of those three, but I don't know if they all agree. But they say, hey, we've all talked about it. We've all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. And so these guys are jealous of Daniel. He's getting promoted. He's an outsider. It's like, we got to take him down. Okay, and if they're going to take him down, it's going to have to be something to do with his God. And so they try to set this trap, and they go to the king, and they basically appeal to his ego. They're like, King Darius, hey, we want to celebrate you. We want to have 30 days of you. Okay, 30 days of you, 30 days of Darius. You know, there's gonna be balloons. We're gonna have, parades. We're gonna have bobbleheads of you. We're gonna have t-shirts. There's gonna be public executions. Okay, it's gonna be awesome. Okay, like 30 days of you. We just want Darius to remind everybody that you're the one in charge. Okay, that this is your kingdom, and we want to have 30 days of you. Well, Darius, he's just kind of mulling this over, like, okay. 30 days of me. Like, I think I could get behind that, 30 days of me. And while he's kind of mulling it over, they say, hey, one other small thing. Verse 8, this says, now your majesty issued the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered. Make it official in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. They're like, hey, it's great that we're talking about this, but let's write it down. Let's put this in writing, which would make it, it would make it absolutely enforceable. He gets it in writing. It can't be repealed. It's going to be absolutely enforceable. So King Darius, verse 9, put the decree in writing. He just fell for it. Okay, 30 days of Darius. He's like, yeah, let's do it. That sounds awesome. So he signs this decree. Okay, that for the next month, for the next 30 days, anyone who prays to anyone other than him, they're going to be thrown into this pit of lions. Well, news of this decree, it kind of spreads throughout the entire kingdom. And Daniel, he hears about it. Okay, he hears about this decree that King Darius has just sent out. And what does he do? Here's what he did. Verse 10, it says, now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. And what did he do? What did he do? And this is really a place where we can kind of put ourselves in the story right here. I mean, what would you do? Well, what would I do? I mean, I'll tell you what I would do, probably, if I had to think about it. It's like 30 days. Like, all I got to do is not pray for 30 days. Like, that's pretty easy for me. Like, I can do that. I can not pray for 30 days, or I can at least, I can do it in my bathroom with the door closed, where nobody's going to see. I can keep this secret. What would you do? And this is really the point of the whole story. What do you do when you are certain that the right thing is going to cost you? And this is where we're going to find out about Daniel. This is where we're going to find out what's really important to him. This is where we're going to find out if his integrity is disposable. Is it something he can just cast out? What do you do when you're certain that the right thing is going to cost you? Well, here's what Daniel did. Not once, 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed. Right there in the window, there's probably a lattice people could see. People knew his habits. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, catch this, just as he had done before. What did Daniel do? He did what he'd always done. He just you issue this decree that's against who I am, against what I believe. And it says, what am I going to do? I'm going to be who I am. I'm not going to change. It's not as if you're actually really in charge. I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to pray just as I had before. He prayed just as he had always done. He says, who I am, what is valuable to me. I'm not going to keep it secret. I'm not going to throw it out the window. Just because you've issued this decree, Daniel, he prayed just as he had done before. He chose integrity. He chose to continue to stay faithful to who he was and what God had called him to do, even if it was going to cost him. And so he prayed just as he had done before. And he's going to need it because, of course, Daniel's enemies, they've got some spies, okay? They know his patterns. They see Daniel praying, so they go back to the king. They see Daniel, and here's kind of how that conversation goes. Verse 11 says, then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not, king, refresh our memory right here. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? King, is that right? Didn't you issue that decree? Do you remember saying that? You wrote it down? Do you remember? Of course he remembered. The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So they remind him of what he said, and they're like, well, we dropped by Daniel's room, to give him his 30 days of Daniel swag bag and kind of talk about all that. You'll never guess what we saw. You'll never guess what he was doing. Verse 13, then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays. He still prays, even though you said not to. He still prays 3 times a day. King, we can't believe he would do that. We're just so disappointed that he would do that. Well, it turns out Darius, he's a little troubled by this too, okay, because he thinks pretty highly of Daniel, okay, and he's seen the person that he is, and he's going to make him prime minister over his entire country. He thinks highly of him, and he knows he's kind of backed himself into a corner, so he's going to do everything he can to try to save him. Verse 14 says, when the king heard this, he was greatly distressed, and he was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. He calls together all of his lawyers. He says, listen, I know this has got my signature on it, and I know I issued this decree. I know that was me, but there's got to be some loophole here. There's got to be some way that we can get out of this. We don't really have to follow through with this, do we? I don't have to throw this man that I think so much of. I don't have to throw him in the lion's den. There has to be some way out. But there wasn't. There wasn't. Verse 15, then the man went as a group to King Darius and said to him, remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king has issued can be changed. And Darius is stuck. Okay, he's stuck. He's kind of backed himself in the corner. There's nothing else that he can do. And when left with no other choice, verse 16, so the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. Actually, they kind of lowered him into the lion's den. He's a 70-year-old man at this point, and it's, there's just this big pit, and they lower him into the lion's den. They lower him onto the floor of this rat-infested, human gore-covered pit. But just before they lower him in, the king, he kind of leans in, and I just kind of picture him kind of leaning in and whispering in Daniel's ear. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. It's so powerful. May your God, the God that you prioritize, that the God that means more to you than your own preservation, May that God who means that much to you, is that real to you, who is that significant to you, may that God, may he rescue you. Then a stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of the nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating, without any entertainment being brought to him. And he could not sleep. He's just so troubled by this. He's 30 days of Darius. Like, whose idea was that? He's just so mad. He's like, this is so stupid. And he couldn't sleep. Well, at the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice. Notice he didn't move the stone away. He just called. He didn't want to see it. He's seen the aftermath of this situation too many times. So he didn't want to see that again. So he calls out. He says, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? Okay, and this is probably one of the three most famous stories in the Bible. And you guys know how this story ends. Okay, you know how the story ends. The problem with when we get so familiar with these stories a lot of times we can miss the point. You see, the point of this story, it's not what's going to happen next. The point of the story isn't is God going to rescue Daniel from the mouth of the lions? The point of the story is what's already happened. We could actually stop reading it right here. The point isn't what's going to happen next. The point is what is already going to happen. At least that was the point to Daniel. Okay, that's what Daniel was concerned about. Daniel, he wasn't so much concerned about the outcome of his decision. If he wanted his decision, if his goal was to not be eaten by lions, he would have made a different decision. Okay, he just would have kept it to himself. He wouldn't pray. We don't see any promise in here that God's going to rescue Daniel from the lion's den. We don't even see him praying to God to deliver him, which I'm sure that happened. But the point to Daniel wasn't, hey, was God going to rescue me? I'm going to stay faithful to him if he rescues me. The point to Daniel was doing the right thing. Was doing the right thing, even if it was going to cost him. The point to Daniel was faithfulness to God, even if it was going to cost him. And when they threw Daniel into that lion's den, I'm sure he thought, it's going to cost me. Faithfulness to God, it's going to cost me his life. He had no reason to believe otherwise in that moment. The point to Daniel was doing the right thing, even when he was certain that doing the right thing was going to cost him. Integrity. The point was faithfulness to God. So how do we live that way? How do we have the courage to make that type of decision? Where do we get the courage to do the right thing when we're certain that the right thing is going to cost us? Well, I think that's kind of the point, what we see from Daniel's life, that type of courage, the courage to live with integrity. Listen, it's not something that we kind of muster up in the moment. That type of courage, the courage to live with integrity, that type of courage is a habit. Okay, courage is a habit. It's not something that we muster up in the moment. Courage is a habit, and we can kind of see that play out through Daniel's life. And so I just want to point out just a couple things from that story, some ways where Daniel, he cultivated that habit of courage in his life to live with integrity when the moment of testing came, to do the right thing, even if the right thing was going to cost him. And the first one that we see, it's kind of obvious, but Daniel, he cultivated the habit of consistency in prayer. Okay, he cultivated the habit of consistency in prayer, and that's kind of the first one that we see in his life. You notice whenever the king issued that edict, okay, what did Daniel do? He went to his room and he prayed, but how did he pray? Just as he had done before. Just as he had done before. That habit of prayer, of dependence of God, it was built into his life. And when the moment of testing came, he continued to pray just as he had done before. Listen, kneeling to pray, that's what gives us the strength to stand. You know, we just moved. I had a television in my living room, okay? And I recently moved the television in my living room to my back patio. You can see it tonight if you guys come over for dinner. But I just recently moved it to my back patio because I just, love sweating to death as I watch television here in the Texas heat. But we took it down and I moved it to my back patio, and we don't have cable. Okay, I don't know if anybody still has cable, but we don't have cable. We have, to watch television, we have like different streaming services, YouTube TV, Netflix, things like that. And so our TV has Wi-Fi capability. So when I took my TV out of my living room and moved it onto my back patio, what was the first thing that I had to check to make sure that it would work? I had to make sure that it would still connect to the Wi-Fi. I had to make sure that it would still connect to the router. Listen, I can take that TV, I can move it out on my back deck, and it looks awesome, but if it can't connect to the Wi-Fi, if it doesn't connect to the router, it is just a useless black rectangle just taking up space on the back of my TV deck. For my TV to work, for my TV to function as a television is supposed to function, it has to be connected to a source outside of itself. Okay, that's where it gets the power to do what it's supposed to do. And the same thing is true for us. The same thing is true for me. The same thing is true for you, for me to do the right thing. Even when the right thing is going to cost me, I've got to be connected. I've got to be connected to a power source outside of myself, and I cultivate it. I do that with consistency in prayer. Listen, I don't pray when the crisis comes. I cultivate that habit in my life before then. I've got to be connected to a power that's outside of me. And so that's been hard for me. Okay, that's kind of, I'll just be honest with me, like prayer is something my entire Christian life I have to fight for. Okay, I just kind of have this mentality. There's like, I'm just going to do it myself. Okay, I'm just going to do it. It's hard to stop, and it's just hard for me. But it's something I've had to really fight for throughout my Christian life. And so I just did want to tell you guys about a resource that I found that's been really helpful for me. Okay, it's just an app. Okay, it's called Prayer Mate, M-A-T-E. It's a free app that you can download. It helps to organize your prayer life. It kind of keeps a lot of those prayers in front of you. I've been using that just the last few weeks. Okay, and it has helped me a lot. And so, but if we want to have the courage to live with integrity, we got to cultivate a consistency in prayer in my life. And so the first one is consistency in prayer. And two, we cultivate the habit of courage. The second one's not as obvious. We cultivate that habit by seeing Jesus as a greater Daniel. Okay, by seeing Jesus as a greater Daniel. Let's kind of see how the story ends. Verse 21, it says, Daniel answered, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I done any wrong before you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. So God, he did deliver Daniel. And we start to wonder, kind of the question we ask is, hey, is he going to deliver us? Okay, if I take a stand for integrity and do what's right just because it's right, even if it's going to cost me, does that mean that God, he's always going to just deliver me here in this earth in the way that I want to see it? Are things going to happen the way that I want to happen? Are they going to turn out the way that I want them to turn out? Is that always going to happen? Man, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I hope you take a stand for integrity and you get promoted to CEO of your company, okay? But I just don't know if that's going to happen. As we look throughout the New Testament, one of the things that Jesus calls us to do is to suffer well, okay? And to suffer for his name. So I don't know. But again, that's not the point. You see, the point of the story of Daniel and the lions, and the point is who this actually points to. And maybe you recognize this as we were reading through the story, but there are some things in his life that you have seen before. You see, Daniel, he's not the only person in the Bible who was falsely accused, okay, by a group of people to try to find a reason to take his life. Daniel's not the only person in this book. Okay, not the only person in the Bible who was put behind a stone and left to die. Daniel's not the only person in the Bible who came out of that tomb the following day. He walked out of there alive. You see, the point of Daniel's story is it points to who's going to come after him. It points to Jesus, that he came and he lived a perfect life. He died on the cross for our sins. He rose from the dead. And if we put our trust in him, we accept his gift of eternal life. He comes and he's with us. And listen, I don't know how things will work out, if it's always going to work out in this world like we want it to. But the thing that Daniel's story points to is no matter what we're going through, Jesus, he's with us. He's with us in the middle of it. And listen, if even faithfulness to him, even if your integrity ends up costing you, bringing you to the point to where it costs you your life, he's already taken care of that as well. He's with you. He's with you. And so courage is a habit. It's a habit that we cultivate. Consistency in prayer. And remembering who we have in Jesus, who Daniel points to. I mean, it's so important that we know that and that we live that out. Last story here and we'll be done. Some of you have heard this story before. But about a year and a half ago, I was coaching my son's middle school basketball game. Okay? And it was like end of the year, playoffs, like it's important, okay? This is a very important sixth grade basketball game. So we're at this middle school basketball game, and it's a tight game, okay? Fourth quarter, the score is tied. We've got about 3-4 minutes left in the game, and my best ball handler, okay, really my only ball handler, the only one who could get the ball up the court, with under pressure when they were pressing him. Unfortunately, it wasn't Cooper. It was Tom, okay? This kid named Tom. So my best ball handler, Tom, he fouls out. Okay, he gets his fifth foul, which means he's ineligible to play. And so he gets that foul, and so the ref tells the scorekeeper that he's fouled, and the ref doesn't know it's his fifth foul, but the scorekeeper, he notices it's his fifth foul. He's out of the game. And so this is kind of a volunteer scorekeeper, so he doesn't know that it's his responsibility to tell the ref that this player is now ineligible. So what does he do? Well, he just tells me. He's like, hey, coach, that was Tom's fifth foul. He's ineligible. He's fouled out. He can't play anymore. And they just keep playing. He just leaves it to me. Well, I'm sitting there, and it's like, well, no one's like making me say anything, you know? And so it's like this tight game. It's close. I'm literally sitting there just kind of like my daughter was in the backseat of my truck, like my integrity, middle school basketball game. Like my integrity, middle school basketball game. So unfortunately, I chose middle school basketball game, okay? I kept him in the game. I just didn't say anything. I was like, oh, no. If they do it, that's fine. But I'm not going to volunteer this information. And so he goes on. Tom has a great last 4 minutes, and we win the game. And we're driving home later that night after the game, and everybody's just celebrating, everybody's excited, and I just can't stop thinking about it. It's just eating me up inside. It's a stupid middle school basketball game, and I'm just kind of having this back and forth all the way home. We pull into our driveway, and I'm just like, I throw it in park, and I'm just like, I got to do something about this. And so I just tell Ashley and the kids, like, hey, I cheated. I left Tom in the game when I knew that he had fouled out. I wasn't supposed to, and you guys get out. I got to drive back to the gym, and I got to go tell the director what I just did. And Cooper's like, no, we're going to have to forfeit. Like, everybody's like upset. I'm like, I got to do it. It's the right thing to do, even if it costs me. And so I go up and I drive back to the gym, and it's so embarrassing. I'm like 42 years old at that point. You know, I'm walking into this gym, and I'm like tracking down this tournament director, and he's in a conversation, and I'm just kind of hovering there over him like really awkwardly. And finally I just go up, and I was like, sir, can I talk to you? He's like, yeah. I was like, hey, we just played that game right before, and like this is super embarrassing, but like the scorekeeper told me that Tom had fouled out, and I knowingly left him in the game. I left him in the game, like I keep letting him play, and I just felt like I had to tell you that. He just looks at me like I'm the weirdest person in the world, and it was so awkward, okay, and it was so embarrassing, okay, for me to do that. And he didn't make us forfeit the game, you know. And I'm not trying to say this is like a Lion's Den type moment or anything, but it did cost me something. Like it cost me some embarrassment. Okay, it could have cost us the game. If we had to forfeit that game, it was going to cost me a lot of really weird conversations with all the parents on all the teams. You know, it did cost me something. But here's why I tell you that story. Is I was sitting there in my truck, telling my family, like everything that I just done, like, hey, I got to do the right thing. I lied. I got to make this right. Sitting in my truck at that time, in the back seat of my truck, was my then 9-year-old daughter. Okay, and a year and a half later, my 11-year-old daughter, when she's sitting in the backseat of my truck again, having her own little kind of crisis of integrity moment. You know what she did? She did the right thing, even if it could cost her. She said, Dad, I got to tell you something. I threw some food at this kid at school today. And listen, I don't know if my basketball gate moment of 2023 played anything in her decision at that time or not. But even if it did a little, whatever the cost for her to see me try to cultivate this habit of integrity in my life, the courage to live that way, and to watch her try to cultivate that habit to live with integrity in her life as well, whatever it costs, it was worth it. It was worth it, because imagine a world like that. Imagine a world where kids, they just did the right thing just because it was the right thing. Imagine a world full of people, of Daniels and Danielles who do what's right just because it's right, regardless of what it's going to cost them. Imagine if we lived that way as a church, and how God could use that in the lives of our friends, of our family, of our neighbors, of our coworkers, if they just saw people that lived with integrity, even if it cost them. And I think that would be a pretty great world to live in. And more importantly, I think it'll point our world to a really great Savior. So let's cultivate that habit of courage. Let's be people who live with integrity. Courage is a habit. To live that way is a habit. Let's begin to cultivate it in our lives. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you for this story. This story of Daniel and the lion's den, this story that a lot of us have heard before. God, thank you for the example of Daniel. Just 3,000 years ago, he's wrestling with the same questions and problems that we wrestle with today. And God, I do pray that we would live that way. I pray, Father, that what is most important to us isn't just how life turns out. It isn't things always working our way. I pray that we would value faithfulness to you, that we would value integrity. We've just seen stories this week, even our own part of the city, of just how destructive that can be when we don't. And so, God, I pray that wouldn't be true of us. I pray, God, we would cultivate that habit of courage, that we would be people that live in dependence upon you. That we would look to Jesus and what he promises us and who he has made us. And that would be enough. And we would value that over any other outcome of our life. So God, I pray that you would give us courage, that we would walk as clean people with integrity before you into this world. And I just pray all this in Jesus' name.